Hi, Andrew Jessup. Going back to this issue of legislation, it's something I've been campaigning for a long time, and hopefully whoever the two winning candidates are, maybe you would, from the inside, join this campaign and work towards getting legislation that's written in plain English. So would you support a change to the way that we do legislation that is written in a way to make lawyers rich? You've got to say
Right. Plain English.
Okay.
Or Manx.
For the Manx, yeah. So for the last 30 years I've been a reviser on GCSE specifications. Okay, so that means that, for example, last week I was working on the 2023 paper for one of the main English exam boards, and the paper arrives to me with its resources and the questions already written. My role over a period of a day or so is to provide scrutiny for this, going through the figures one by one, going through the questions word by word, sentence by sentence, comma by comma, and giving feedback. And the feedback is not just about, is this question in the specification, it's, is this question clear, is it unambiguous, will the average 16-year-old understand it, and is it of an appropriate level of demand for GCSE questions? Okay, so I'm very, very used to working through questions and trying to simplify them and break them down so people understand. I'm very happy to do that, very happy to support legislation in plain English, although I'm fully aware that those who take the legal position may want to have some specific phrases in there which are long-standing phrases or widely used in legislation, and I can understand why some elements of that may appear, but I'd applaud your sentiment in general terms. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Paul's rather stole my thunder there on the educational aspect. So clearly, as I said, as a teacher, a few feedback and almost what we would call command words is a big element of it, and that's certainly something I would understand to be brought with it. For me, it's an aspect of education, which education as a whole. I think there's kind of lots of things which occur in government, which almost appears as kind of cloak and daggers, and I think there needs to be a little bit more openness in terms of that. So I'd certainly be in favour of promoting kind of more everyday language. I think the clearer, the more concise that can be, the brevity of it, just to avoid any confusion for anybody. As Paul said, that there is a legal stance, and I'm sure that the legal people will need to be backed up by that. But within that, I'm sure we could put together some sort of statement or more user-friendly language that would display the particular piece of legislation in a little bit more of a concise way for everyday use. So I certainly would be in favour of that, yes.
Thank you.
And I think it has to be understandable, and understandable by you, by me, by everybody. And if it's not understandable, how can we follow the law? So, plain English would be good, but as long as it's then still legal, in the sense that if somebody did do something either wrong or right, they know they're following the right instructions. So, understandable is where I would put it. If that's plain English, brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, anything that helps people understand and engage with our Parliament, I think is helpful. So yes, I support that. I'm not sure how much they'll achieve in 15 months. And I think it's not just the actual wording on the bills, it's the language that's used in the debating chambers. All of this, I beg to move, and my honourable member, and all this. I think that, to be honest, I think that's one of the reasons why people sometimes struggle to engage with Timbold and both the branches. So anything we can do to bring it more accessible to the people who we represent, I think would be commendable.
You're absolutely right, but there is a danger by Englishifying it or simplifying it that there would be ways round things. I think that's why law is developed. But I mean, I've been sitting reading legislation, trying to spot up and reading Hansard of the MLC meetings, and they call it the other place, and it's really bizarre to actually sit and read, and it is tough, you're right, but they do issue summaries of legislation and sort of background reading, so that is there if you dig around and look for it. So in one sense I completely agree, however I think we've got to just be careful to not Englishify it too much. I think that we could be in danger of opening ourselves. No, don't worry.
That's great.
I feel you paid, Andrew. I mentioned earlier that previously I was a chartered tax advisor in the UK, and I spent many years trying to interpret and understand HMRC legislation. During that time, I wrote a number of articles trying to encourage greater simplification of that legislation. I'll leave you to be the judge of the success or otherwise of that, given the current raft of tax legislation in the UK. Legislation has to be clear, it has to be understandable, it has to be accessible. In an ideal world, that should be plain English, but as Corelli says, that's not always the case, because sometimes there's a danger towards oversimplification. But certainly I see a key role of LegCo, of making sure that the legislation is as brief as it can be, says what was intended by the keys when it was introduced, and that if there is a better way of saying it, then maybe bring that forward. But ultimately, certainty, clarity and accessibility.
As you know, when it comes to law, words matter. And it's really important that we are able to convey the words in a very concise and clear format. Believe it or not, you're taught in law school to use plain English. And I think what happens is the younger generation comes out of schools and they're competing with an older mindset who's used to using the aforesaid language. So I think what we need to do is encourage, like you said, people to understand that the end users of these laws need to be able to understand them and be able to abide by them. And by using language that's clear, concise, and on point with the intention, we're going to get closer to everybody being able to understand and be able to participate in our laws.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, that's everyone done. Yeah.